The bear attack had created trauma injuries that would challenge a fully equipped emergency room. Punctured lung, severed arteries, possible internal organ damage, and Tom Mitchell was treating them with camping gear in a remote Montana wilderness. His military medical training told him Jake had maybe 20 minutes before blood loss caused irreversible shock, and the emergency evacuation that could save his life was hours away through terrain that helicopters couldn't reach. Blood was everywhere. Jake Wilson's chest looked like it had been torn open by a chainsaw. The 600-pound grizzly bear had ripped through muscle, bone, and vital organs with claws that left wounds no camping first aid kit was designed to handle. Tom was performing emergency surgery with a camping knife, duct tape, and medical knowledge that came from treating wounded soldiers in combat zones where conventional hospitals didn't exist. "Jake, stay with me," Tom screamed, as his best friend's eyes rolled back and his breathing became shallow gasps that indicated he was minutes from death. Welcome to Secret Human Stories. Before I tell you this incredible story of hidden military medical expertise and wilderness trauma surgery that saved a life in impossible conditions, tell me in the comments what city and country you're watching from. And if you want to see more stories like this, hit that subscribe button right now, because sometimes the most skilled combat medics are leading peaceful camping trips, waiting for the moment when their battlefield training can save someone they care about most. 4:17 p.m., Glacier National Park, Montana. 60 miles from the nearest hospital, 12 miles from the closest road, and zero cell phone coverage. Tom Mitchell and Jake Wilson had been best friends since college, camping partners for 8 years, and business partners in an outdoor adventure company that specialized in backcountry wilderness experiences. Jake had been gathering firewood when the grizzly attacked. Tom heard the screaming from 200 yards away, the sound of someone fighting for their life against an animal that could kill a human being in seconds. By the time Tom reached the campsite, the bear was gone, and Jake was lying motionless in a pool of blood that was growing larger every second. The injuries were catastrophic. 4 parallel claw wounds across Jake's chest that had punctured his right lung, severed intercostal arteries, and possibly damaged his heart. Deep gashes on his arms and legs where he'd tried to defend himself. Massive blood loss that was putting him into hypovolemic shock. But Tom Mitchell wasn't just a wilderness guide. For 8 years, he'd been Staff Sergeant Tom Mitchell, United States Air Force combat medic, specializing in combat trauma medicine in Iraq and Afghanistan, where wounded airmen needed immediate surgical intervention in conditions where medevac wasn't available. Tom's military training kicked in with deadly precision. Primary survey, airway management, hemorrhage control, treatment of pneumothorax, but he was in the Montana wilderness with camping supplies, no medical equipment, and a dying friend who needed trauma surgery that would challenge a fully equipped hospital. From his camping pack, he retrieved items that seemed like ordinary outdoor gear, but could serve extraordinary medical purposes in the hands of someone with combat medical training. Camping rope became surgical sutures. Duct tape became chest seals. His camp stove became a sterilization device. Whiskey from their evening supplies became antiseptic and anesthesia. "Jake, I'm going to save your life, but I need you to stay conscious," Tom said, as he began the most challenging medical procedure of his civilian career. "You know how I never talk about my time in the Air Force? I was a combat medic. I've done this before." Tom began treating Jake's punctured lung first, the most immediate threat to his survival. Using a camping knife sterilized over the camp stove flame, Tom made a precise incision between Jake's ribs and inserted a hollowed-out pen tube to relieve the tension pneumothorax that was preventing his friend from breathing effectively. The procedure worked. Jake's breathing improved immediately, but Tom was just getting started. The arterial bleeding from the claw wounds required immediate surgical repair that would test every skill he'd learned during his 8 years of combat medicine. But here's what made this wilderness surgery even more impossible. He could hear the grizzly bear moving through the forest nearby, probably attracted by the smell of blood. He was performing life-saving trauma surgery while listening for the sounds of a 600-pound predator that might return to finish what it started. If you're amazed by what you're hearing so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button because this story is about to get even more intense. Tom used his camping knife as a scalpel, paracord as suture material, and techniques learned from treating battlefield trauma to repair Jake's severed arteries. His hands moved with the precision of someone who'd performed similar procedures under enemy fire, but now he was saving his best friend instead of wounded soldiers. The arterial repair took 43 minutes of surgery performed in a wilderness setting with improvised equipment. Tom's combat medical training had taught him to work efficiently under impossible conditions, but this was the first time he'd adapted military trauma medicine to camping supplies. While working on Jake's chest injuries, Tom simultaneously treated the defensive wounds on his arms and legs. The claw marks were deep, but hadn't hit major blood vessels, painful and requiring sutures, but not life-threatening like the chest trauma. "Tom, how did you learn to do this?" Jake gasped, now conscious and alert thanks to the successful lung treatment. 8 years Air Force combat medicine in Iraq and Afghanistan. I've treated trauma injuries from IED explosions, gunshot wounds, and battlefield casualties under conditions where the nearest hospital was a helicopter right away, if helicopters could even reach us. But Tom's greatest challenge wasn't the medical treatment. It was getting Jake out of the wilderness alive. They were 12 miles from the nearest Forest Service road. Jake couldn't walk, and Tom would have to carry his patient through mountain terrain while maintaining his medical stability. Tom constructed an improvised stretcher using hiking poles, tent material, and climbing rope, then began the grueling evacuation that would test every aspect of his military training. He had to function as both combat medic and evacuation specialist, providing continuous medical care while navigating through wilderness terrain. The evacuation took 7 hours. Tom carried Jake 12 miles through Montana backcountry, stopping every 30 minutes to check vital signs, adjust bandages, and provide additional medical treatment as needed. His Air Force physical conditioning, combined with his medical knowledge, enabled him to perform what amounted to a mobile intensive care operation in the wilderness. But here's the twist that would change everything he thought he knew about the bear attack. When they finally reached the Forest Service road and cell phone coverage returned, Jake made a confession that revealed why the grizzly had attacked and why Tom's medical intervention had saved more than just his life. "Tom," Jake said on the stretcher as they waited for the ambulance, "I need to tell you something about why we were really camping in that area." Jake's confession would shock Tom and reveal a secret that his friend had been keeping for months. The camping trip hadn't been recreational. Jake had been using their wilderness guide business as cover for illegal activities that had put them both in danger. "I've been running drugs through the national park system, using our camping permits to transport cocaine from Canadian suppliers to distributors in Montana. That bear attack happened because I was checking a drug cache hidden near our campsite." Tom's world collapsed. The man he'd risked his life to save, his business partner of 8 years, had been using their wilderness guide business as a front for drug smuggling operations. The camping trip that nearly killed Jake had been about retrieving hidden contraband, not enjoying the outdoors. But here's the revelation that would test everything Tom believed about friendship, loyalty, and the medical oath he'd sworn as a combat medic. Jake's involvement in drug smuggling hadn't been voluntary. "Tom, my daughter Emma is being held by the people I'm working for. They kidnapped her 3 months ago and said they'd kill her if I didn't use our business to transport drugs. The only reason I was checking that cache was because they threatened to hurt her if I didn't retrieve the shipment." Jake's daughter, Tom's goddaughter, had been kidnapped by a drug cartel that was using her as leverage to force Jake's cooperation in their smuggling operation. The camping trip that resulted in the bear attack had been Jake's attempt to complete one final drug run that would secure Emma's release. "I never wanted you to know because I was afraid they'd threaten you too. When that bear attacked me, I thought maybe it was better if I died and took the whole problem with me." Tom faced a choice that would define the rest of their friendship and determine whether his goddaughter would live or die: report Jake's drug smuggling activities to federal authorities and probably get Emma killed by the cartel, or help his friend find a way to rescue his daughter while providing evidence that would allow law enforcement to arrest the kidnappers. If you're on the edge of your seat right now, smash that subscribe button because you need to hear how this ends. Tom chose loyalty to his friend and protection for his goddaughter. Working with FBI agents who specialized in kidnapping cases, Tom helped develop a plan that would allow Jake to provide information about the cartel's operations in exchange for a rescue operation that would save Emma and arrest the people who had been threatening his family. The plan required Tom to use his military training in a completely different way. Not as a combat medic, but as someone who could provide tactical support for the FBI rescue operation that would save Emma's life. Tom's Air Force experience in combat medical operations made him valuable to the FBI team planning Emma's rescue. His knowledge of tactical medicine, his experience with high-stress operations, and his understanding of Jake's situation provided insights that helped law enforcement develop a successful rescue strategy. The rescue operation worked perfectly. Emma was recovered safely. 12 cartel members were arrested, and Jake's cooperation led to the seizure of $23 million in illegal drugs and the dismantling of a major smuggling network operating through national park systems. Jake was arrested, but released with reduced charges in exchange for his testimony against the cartel. His cooperation had been coerced through kidnapping threats, and federal prosecutors recognized that he'd been a victim rather than a willing participant in the drug smuggling operation. 6 months later, Jake was back home with Emma, serving probation and community service while rebuilding his relationship with his daughter. His first conversation with Tom since the bear attack would determine whether their friendship could survive the deception and redemption that had nearly cost both their lives. "Tom, I know I lost the right to call you my best friend when I lied to you about the drug smuggling, but I want you to know that when that bear was tearing me apart, the only thing that gave me hope was knowing that if anyone could save me, it would be you." Tom's response reflected the values he'd learned during 8 years of combat medical service. "Jake, combat medics don't choose who to save based on whether they deserve it. We save people because saving lives is what we do. You made choices under impossible circumstances to protect Emma. You're still my friend." Make sure you're subscribed because I've got more incredible stories like this coming your way. Now for the background that made this wilderness medical miracle possible. Staff Sergeant Tom Mitchell had served 8 years with the United States Air Force Medical Service, specializing in combat trauma medicine and battlefield medical operations from 2010 to 2018. His military medical training included advanced trauma life support, emergency surgery, combat casualty care, and the ability to provide complex medical treatment in resource-limited environments. Air Force combat medics are trained to treat traumatic injuries under conditions that would overwhelm civilian emergency medicine. Gunshot wounds, explosion trauma, severe lacerations, and life-threatening injuries that require immediate surgical intervention when conventional medical facilities are unavailable. During his Air Force service, Tom had treated wounded airmen in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other classified locations where his medical skills were the difference between soldiers living or dying. His combat medical record included 189 successful trauma interventions, 67 battlefield surgeries, and a reputation among aircrew as someone who could save lives under conditions that would challenge the best civilian trauma centers. But Tom's specialty had been what Air Force medics call austere environment medicine, providing advanced medical care using improvised equipment, non-medical supplies, and techniques that combined military medical training with field innovation. These skills were essential when treating wounded personnel in locations where conventional medical equipment was damaged, unavailable, or inadequate. The psychological demands of combat medicine were extraordinary. Every wounded airman Tom treated represented someone whose survival depended entirely on his medical skill, judgment, and ability to perform complex procedures under conditions that included enemy fire, equipment failures, and the constant pressure of life-or-death medical decisions. Tom's transition out of military service in 2018 had been difficult. PTSD from combat medical operations, survivor's guilt from airmen he couldn't save despite perfect medical technique, and the challenge of finding civilian work that utilized his medical skills without triggering combat-related stress responses had led him to seek employment in peaceful environments, where his leadership abilities could be used constructively. Wilderness guiding had seemed perfect, using his outdoor skills and leadership training to help people experience nature safely, sharing his love of the outdoors without the medical pressure that had defined his military service, and building a business that created positive experiences instead of responding to trauma. For 5 years, Tom had convinced himself that his military medical skills were unnecessary artifacts that had no place in his new civilian life focused on outdoor recreation and wilderness education. But some training never retires, especially when it involves saving lives in extreme conditions where conventional medical support isn't available. Jake's bear attack had created exactly the kind of medical emergency that Tom's Air Force combat medical training had prepared him to handle. Severe trauma requiring immediate surgical intervention in a resource-limited environment where patient survival depended entirely on the medic's ability to improvise and adapt. Tom's story teaches us that military medical training creates lifelong healers who carry their life-saving skills into civilian communities, ready to use their expertise when emergencies threaten the people they care about most. The combat medic who once saved wounded airmen in Afghanistan found a way to use his medical skills to save his best friend in the Montana wilderness, proving that friendship and the commitment to preserving life are stronger than deception and stronger than the wild animals that threaten both courage and loyalty. The wilderness guide who used to be an Air Force combat medic became the friend who still saves lives when bear attacks create medical emergencies that only military training can handle, demonstrating that some skills transcend the environments where they were learned, and some commitments to saving lives never end, regardless of whether you're wearing a military uniform or camping gear. American outdoor enthusiasts can explore wilderness areas with confidence, knowing that warriors like Tom Mitchell have traded their military medical equipment for camping gear, but never surrendered their commitment to saving lives when nature threatens the people they guide through the beautiful and dangerous places they love to share.